Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this session. My name is Maria Margaglione, and I'm the DBSA Programs Director. Today, we have Dr. Holly Swartz with us to talk about how addressing physical health can be good for mental health. Dr. Swartz is a professor of psychiatry at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. She received her medical degree from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine and completed her psychiatric residency training at New York Hospital Cornell University School of Medicine. Dr. Swartz's research focuses on understanding and optimizing psychosocial interventions for mood disorders. She is well known for her work evaluating interpersonal psychotherapy and interpersonal and social rhythm therapy as treatments for depression and bipolar disorder. She is the author of over 100 publications, co-editor of the book Bipolar II Disorder, Recognition, Understanding, and Treatment, and the editor of the American Journal of Psychotherapy. Dr. Swartz has held leadership positions for national and international professional organizations, including president of the International Society for Interpersonal Psychotherapy and treasurer for the International Society of Bipolar Disorders. She also sits on DBSA's Scientific Advisory Board and was the recipient of the 2019 Gerald Clareman Senior Investigator Award, which is DBSA's highest honor, recognizing researchers whose work advances knowledge of the causes, diagnosis, and treatment of depression and bipolar disorder. Thanks for being here with us, Holly.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Before I hand it over to you, I just wanted to go over objectives for today real quick. We are going to learn how sleep, nutrition, and physical activity play a role in regulating our physical and mental health. We're going to discuss how routine can improve mental health symptoms and learn how to take small steps to create your physical health goals and be gentle with yourself in the process. So important. So I am going to stop sharing so you can share your screen.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to actually start by talking about circadian rhythms, and you may think that that has absolutely nothing to do with the objectives that Maria just outlined, but hopefully I'll convince you otherwise, because what I hope to do is actually provide us with a framework for thinking about sort of physiologic processes that are so important in both our physical and mental health. And that might just give us some clues as to things that we could do to help ourselves feel better physically and mentally. So I'm gonna just start with kind of like a theoretical overview of circadian rhythms, and then sort of move along to think more specifically how they are especially important for those of us who experience mood disorders. So let me share my screen so you can see my slides. Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yeah. Yep.
All right, good. Oops, so two screens going here. So as I said, I'm going to start by talking about circadian rhythms or body clocks. Here, first of all, are my disclosures, but I think none of them are especially relevant to our talk today. So as I said, I mean, you might be thinking, what do body clocks or circadian rhythms have to do with mood, physical health, and mood disorders? So hopefully in the next, maybe 15, 20 minutes or so, I'm going to hopefully try to point some of those issues out for all of us. So this is a sort of graphic representation of our health across the 24-hour cycle. And this is just kind of a prototype of somebody who typically gets up early in the morning and goes to sleep around, 10 or 11 at night. And this is intuitive. So you probably sort of know this stuff, that, that your body has a certain kind of clock to it. So even if you've never really thought about this in much detail before, I imagine when I say this isn't going to shock anybody, but that, at nighttime, actually for instance, your bowel habits shut down. So, I mean, of course, some of us have to, run and pee a few times during the night, especially as we get older, but, by and large, our bowel habits are mostly active during the daytime, but other physical health functions are really tightly controlled by these 24-hour rhythms. So for instance, our cognitive alertness tends to be highest in the early morning hours, but our physical prowess is actually greatest in later in the day. So in the early, late afternoon, early evening, probably related to our sort of historical ancestors who were foraging for prey at that time of night and had to be able to, run after gazelles and things like that. Our blood pressure, our body temperature, these things also vary across the 24-hour period and are controlled by circadian rhythms, and of course sleep and appetite. So these physical functions are very tightly controlled by our body clocks. This is a kind of a technical looking slide, and we don't really have to go into the details, but I think what's really important here is that the body clock sort of lives in our brains. It's the fancy name for the sort of overall body clock is the suprachiasmatic nucleus. But what's important about this is that there are basically wires running from our eyes to our brain, and the clock is really affected by the light cycle, and so it's actually a system that's responsive to what's going on in the environment. So when the outside world is light, it tells our brain that it's daytime, and as it gets dark, it tells our brain it's nighttime, and then all of those bodily functions start to change based on the light dark cycle. So it's this kind of cool system that is, a body clock running along in your body, but it's also responsive to the external clock. And so you get something that looks like this when things are going well. So when I see CBT, because I'm like a psychotherapy person, I think cognitive behavior therapy, but that actually means core body temperature. So your body temperature is highest when you're awake, and then it drops at nighttime. And then we have other things that go up at nighttime. So the green dotted line is melatonin. So our melatonin levels rise during sleep. Our cortisol levels actually rise in the early morning hours. So we have these things that are kind of all in sync that allow us to get restful sleep at night and allow us to be alert during the day. And when these things all line up, our body clock is aligned with what's happening in the outside world, and we have good physical health, sleep health, and these things are working, chugging along in nice synchronized rhythms. But there are lots of things that can happen to desynchronize our body clock from the external clock. And it can have a huge impact on how we feel. So we feel well when our bodies are aligned, when our body clocks are aligned with the external clock. And when they are misaligned, we actually don't feel all that well. And again, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, although you might not have thought about it this way. So examples of times in our lives when our body clocks are misaligned with the external world are, for instance, shift work. Anyone who's a shift worker who has to be up and working at night when it's dark knows that you can, especially as you're getting used to shifts, can feel pretty crummy, tired, low energy, stomach's upset. You have lots of physical symptoms when your body clock is mismatched. Same thing when we change the clocks. We're coming up soon on changing clocks at the end of October, when we'll fall back an hour. And most everybody knows, and certainly anybody who has kids knows, that people just feel kind of crummy until their body clocks readjust, even from a 1 hour change between the external clock and your body clock. Jet lag, of course, when you're going across multiple time zones, and then just the seasons themselves. I mean, some people experience seasonal affective disorder and notice that at certain times of the year when the light is more or less, that has a huge impact on mood, but it also affects your physical health as well. Your energy, your appetite, and your sleep. So these are common experiences of trouble with entrainment between the body clock and the external clock. Another really common category of altered rhythmicity is mood disorders. So we know that simply that when you have a mood disorder, that you actually have a more sensitive or maybe a more fragile body clock, that this is part of the biology of mood disorders. And we know this, there's lots of research that helps us understand this. We know it from, for instance, animal models. So we understand the genes that control circadian rhythms, and you can change those genes, and you can actually create models of mania in mice when you make those changes in circadian genes. We can measure this in people with mood disorders and see that some of these circadian rhythms that I'm talking about change when you have mood episodes. And we also know it from symptoms, right? So the symptoms of mood disorders, changes in sleep, appetite, energy, concentration, those are all controlled by the circadian system. And so we, again, intuitively know this from the symptoms of mood disorders. And so the circadian system is quite vulnerable in mood disorders, and especially vulnerable to getting out of sync with the external clock. And so I want to show you a very brief video about what happens when clocks are mismatched. This is actually from an online program that we developed called Rhythms in You. It'll mention it for a second at the end. And what I need to do is okay, please bear with me because I have to unshare my slides and then reshare and then share the video. So just bear with me for a second while I do that. Bring up the video. It's a 2-minute video, so it's really short, but all this shifting around is a little annoying. Okay, so I'm going to share my video. Okay.
How do you know when it's time to wake up? Do you rely on your phone to wake you up in the morning? Do you set an alarm clock? Does your mother wake you up? Many of us rely on external alarms to get up in the morning. But each of us has an internal alarm clock too. But did you know that your body clock automatically knows when it's time to wake up? Your body clock uses biology to tell you when it's time to wake up. Your body signals readiness for morning by making changes in your biochemistry so that you become increasingly ready for wakefulness as dawn approaches. Your sleep becomes lighter, your blood pressure rises, the urge to go to the bathroom, which was suppressed by your body clock all night, comes back. Your biologic rhythms let you know when it is time to be hungry, when it is time to be active, even when it is time to poop. When your body clock is running smoothly, it's almost perfectly synchronized with the outside world. You wake up when it's time to get up. You get hungry when the cafeteria clock says it's lunchtime. But what happens when your body clock loses track of time? What happens when your body clock thinks it's 3 a.m., but your boss's office clock says it's 9 a.m.? Or your body clock thinks it's 7 p.m., but the clock says midnight. When your body clock and clocks in the environment are mismatched, you don't feel well. You are hungry at the wrong time of day. You can't sleep when you're supposed to sleep. You can't get up when you have to get up. Mismatched clocks, or desynchronized rhythms, is common in bipolar disorder. If you have bipolar disorder, sometimes your internal clock is out of sync with external clocks. This is associated with lots of uncomfortable feelings, ranging from jet lag-like symptoms to a full episode of mania or depression. In Ray, we will help you to develop strategies to get and keep your body clock in rhythm.
Okay, so this is also true for individuals with depression, unipolar depression. That these videos were made for individuals with bipolar disorder, but it's also true for depression. So let me just go back to my slides for a minute, and let's talk about the implications of mismatched body clocks. So now let me go back to sharing my slides. Okay. Oh no, we're back to the beginning. That was not what I intended to do. Are you seeing the first slide? Is that what you're seeing, Maria? Okay, so let me go. Oh, let's resume slideshow. There we go. Okay, back on track. Okay. So when clocks are out of sync, the idea here is to get them back in sync. And so so what I'm going to talk about are some strategies that we can use to get our body clocks back in sync with the external clock. And when we do that, we feel better. So this is kind of a graphic view of re-entrainment of rhythms. I just think it's a cool slide. I borrowed it from my friend and colleague John Gottlieb, who's a psychiatrist in Chicago. Anyhow, but this can be hard to do, right? Because remember, our brains are relying on light to help us figure out when we are. But this is a picture of the United States at night, and like you can see all these like lights, and so it really confuses our brains. And again, remember, if we've got a mood disorder, our brains our body clocks are especially sensitive, and so this really confuses us. And so trying to re-entrain mismatched rhythms with the sort of post-industrial sort of ambient light is especially hard. So what we often rely on instead are social relationships. So Zeitgeber, for those of you who speak German, and I don't, so I apologize if I'm saying this wrong, means Zeitgeber is a timekeeper. And so the light and dark cycle is a very potent Zeitgeber, but social relationships are also really important Zeitgebers. So these are the social cues that help us set and reset our circadian clock. So our family relationships, our friends, our work, these are things that help keep our body clocks on track. And we can use those social connections to help us stay on track. This has been a huge issue with the pandemic because many of us have lost a lot of those social Zeitgebers that help keep our body clocks running smoothly in the context of social distancing and lockdown. And that's been a real challenge to try to reestablish those social Zeitgebers that can help us and can help our body clocks running smoothly. Other things that we can do to shore up, to remind our body clocks of when it is, are working on our sleep routine. So one thing that's really powerful is to get up at the same time every day. And so one of the tips that we use is to remember that it's not so important that you get up early, but that you get up at a consistent time. You want to keep re-messaging your body clock. Hey, it's morning. Hey, it's morning. And your body clocks needs reinforcement. So repetition of the same information over and over again. So we can, get in the habit of getting up at the same time every day, even on the weekends, same time as you get up during the week. And that can help to realign our body clock. Starting our activities at the same time every day. And if you are working, Monday through Friday, find something to do on Saturday and Sunday at the same time that you would go to work. Again, giving that information, that input to your body clock to keep it on track. Sleep in general is a really important routine, and I could talk tons about sleep, but there's a lot of sleep hygiene information out there, like on the internet, but just things that we keep in mind, keep our sleep routines on track, which have a huge impact on our physical well-being. For instance, like using the bedroom only for sleep and sexual activity, or if you only have one bedroom, then only use your bed for sleep and sexual activities. And don't read or eat or watch TV in bed. Like keep those things separate. That's called like a stimulus control. Be careful about exposure to light at the wrong time. And in particular, it's blue spectrum light that has a huge impact on our brains. And so When possible, we want to eliminate our exposure to artificial light, blue light in particular, and that can come from overhead lights, from any of our screens, computers, phones, whatever. And you really want to try to eliminate that or minimize that, especially 2 hours before bedtime, which tells your brain, bedtime is coming. And we don't want to spend a ton of time in bed if we can't sleep. And so spending too much time in bed actually can confuse the body clock as well. And so making sure that we don't oversleep is also a problem. That's also related to napping. So naps, can be refreshing, but if you've got a sensitive body clock, you got to be careful. And you can confuse your body clock by napping in the middle of the day. And it doesn't know then whether it's sleep is, whether it's nighttime in the middle of the day or nighttime, and then it makes it hard to go to sleep. And so some things that you can do are avoid naps during the middle of the day, or if you have to nap, take a short power nap, limiting it to 20 minutes, and trying to keep that nap to between 1 and 3 p.m. in the afternoon so it doesn't interfere with your ability to fall asleep. And trying to avoid caffeine, which can also have a negative impact on our ability to sleep. So these are just some small tips. There are lots of other ones out there, but that remember, the idea here is to keep our body clocks running smoothly. So, just to kind of, a few take-home points, remember that regular routines are going to help stabilize our mood and our physical health as well. And we can make small incremental changes to help ourselves feel better. We don't have to all of a sudden upend everything we're doing, but start to make smaller changes, and that will set us on the road toward feeling better. I would have to say, if you have to pick one thing to work on, probably a regular wake-up time is the most important thing. So I'd say start there if you're wondering where to start. And also remember social zeitgebers. So human interactions matter, and routines are better when you share it with somebody else. So if you can, maybe find a buddy to help you get there and stay on track. And I'm sure you have lots of creative ways that you can do that. But if you can pair up with someone and share this as a goal, that's good for everybody. So those are just some things to think about. I'm going to stop sharing my slides, and we can hopefully continue this discussion.
Absolutely. I had to mute myself because, 2021 people were mowing their lawns, and I'm glad that's over with. But let me share my screen real quick. Back to the presentation. Okay, so it is time for questions. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there should be a Q&A button, and we welcome questions. We're going to be monitoring that. But just to start us off, I wanted to ask Holly about, so you mentioned, if you don't get a good night's sleep, what about during the week? Say you have terrible sleep during the week. Is there a way to make that up during the weekend, or what's the best way to get back into that?
Yeah, so, it's really hard if you don't sleep well during the week and you're exhausted and feeling crabby. It's a real temptation to say, screw it, I'm just going to spend my entire weekend in bed. But we pay for that if we do that, because that really confuses our body clocks, right? And so then come Monday morning, your body clock is even more out of sync. So you're going to have an even worse week than you did the week before. So from a body clock standpoint, what you want to do is try to stick to your routines on the weekend. And you might give yourself a little bit of leeway. Say, for instance, let yourself sleep in an hour longer on Saturday, and then a half hour longer on Sunday, and then back to square one on Monday. So it may not be exactly what you want to do, but over time, being on a consistent schedule reinforces for your body clock, again, when it is in time, and in the long run, that will help you feel better. So it's tempting to give in to the urge to just collapse into bed for the weekend, but you pay for it if you do it. It's actually not going to help you reset your body clock.
Yeah. Is there something during the day? You mentioned power naps are good, but is there anything like ways of eating or laying low on exercise? Is there anything else that would help get back on track?
Yeah, great question. And I didn't talk about this at all, but so we have body clocks throughout our body, like mini body clocks that sort of send information back up to the big body clock in our brains. And some of the really important information comes from our gastrointestinal tract. And so when we eat is actually really important information for our body clocks as well. And so being really consistent about our meal schedules can also be really helpful in terms of stabilizing our wellness. And so it doesn't have to be a ton of food, but being consistent about when we eat can be really helpful in helping us to stabilize our body clocks. And of course, it's probably more helpful to eat the kinds of foods that aren't going to cause, like a sugar high and then a crash. So, trying to eat foods that that allow your body to fuel up in a way that's consistent without a lot of ups and downs. Again, we're striving for consistency here so that our body feels supported and stable.
Yeah, we are getting some questions in. How do you stay asleep? I'll sleep for 1 hour and wake up and spend 3 more hours falling asleep. We all want to know about this one. Holly, do you have an answer for
no,
that?
it's a really important question. So what we want, so if you wake up in the middle of the night, there's a couple tips. One is don't watch the clock. So, I think there's this kind of negative reinforcing pattern when you've, gotten into this, sort of bad place where you're waking up in the middle of the night and you can't fall back and sleep, and you're like, you wake up and you're panicked and you start watching the clock, and that's actually really counterproductive. So one thing you want to do, you want to have an alarm because you want to get up at the same time every day, but you don't want to actually look at it. So you want to turn the clock away and try to zen out if possible, and not kind of tense up and think, oh my God, I'm going to be up for the next 3 hours. So that's one thing that you can do. If you're really not able to fall back asleep, again, remember I talked about the idea that you want to just keep your bed as a safe place for sleep. So it's not great to just be fighting yourself and tossing and turning. So if you really can't sleep, actually get out of bed, but don't turn the lights on, because the light is going to send a signal to your brain like, wow, it's morning. I think I must be in Europe or somewhere like that, and I have to switch my brain around. So now it's actually daytime. So don't do that. Don't turn lights on. You can use like a night light. That very low level of light won't trigger it. So if you want it to be quite dim, don't put your cell phone on. Best to do something in low light that's a little bit boring. So listening to quiet music, again, not in your bed, but something that will kind of alleviate anxiety, because we all get really anxious when we can't sleep. Again, low light so that we don't disrupt our melatonin secretion, and something that's soothing and hopefully a little bit boring. If you listen to like an audio book, do not listen to like a scary mystery or something like that. Maybe somebody reading like the phone book or something boring, but something. And eventually, as you start to feel yourself getting tired again, and you will, then go back into bed and trying to reestablish your sleep routines. So the idea here would not be to spend a ton of time in bed tossing and turning. And ultimately, the idea would be that your body rehabituates to not panicking about those middle of the night awakenings. And again, being careful not to compensate for that by then taking a nap in the middle of the day, which will make your sleep more likely to be fragmented the following night, which is hard because you're dragging and you're tired and you didn't get enough sleep the night before. But that can then reinforce this negative pattern that you get yourself into.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the hardest time with the not reading in bed. It is such a treat to go read, like hop in at 8:30 and 90 minutes fly by and suddenly, oh, I should go to bed. Well, now I've been lying in bed for hours and my body hurts. So
yeah, so like 10, 15 minutes right before you go to bed, okay. But if you're going to really want to read, probably find another comfortable place, but ideally not in your bed.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Do you have any advice for drastic changes in hours of light, giving north and east in the time zone? This person is in Boston, and that is, you mentioned, time change, fall back, spring forward, jet lag being time change. I guess do you have any advice for that?
So anytime you're going to have to make any kind of time change, it's better, if possible, to make it gradually. So if you know that you're super sensitive to changes in light, and you know you're going to be facing a time change. So let's just take this upcoming, switch from daylight savings time to standard time, and that might not be what the question is about, but I'll just go that there anyhow. You can start by making 15-minute changes, maybe 2 weeks before you're going to change the clocks, to kind of start to reset your own body clock by 15 minutes every 5 days, to gradually fall back with your own body clock. And so that when the time comes that we're actually switching the external clocks, your body clock is actually already aligned with the external clock. So that's generally the advice I have, when you're going across time zones, or when you're facing any kind of major shift in time zones. So if the question though is about like what happens in a place where you don't get a lot of light during the winter time, which happens in more northern latitudes, trying to get it's recommended that we get about 2 hours of sunlight at least per day. I mean, you can get that even in a more northern climate, more northern latitude, mostly. I mean, unless you're like in the North Pole or something like that. But you might want to talk to your doctor about whether you need a light box if that's really affecting you. And light boxes can be helpful for people who are really sensitive to seasonal changes in light exposure.
Yeah, that's if you mentioned living with the mood disorder, is there's extra sensitivity to body clocks. So no living on the North Pole is what I just heard, which thankfully I don't plan on doing. Let's see, when our body temps are at the lowest, 4:30, or highest at 7, what does that mean? How does that affect us at those times?
Well, I mean, a couple different things. We sleep better when our core body temperature is lower. So this is like another reason why, for instance, shift work is so hard. So like you come home, after working the night shift, and your body temperature is actually rising. It actually makes it harder to sleep. So it's another reason why it's really hard for people to switch their sleep schedules around when they're doing shift work. I mean, this is a kind of minor thing, but if anybody has kids and they have they get sick, their temperature tends to spike like at 7 o'clock at night, and you think you're going to be able to send them back to school, and then inevitably they get like a fever. It's like 7 o'clock at night. So you can kind of expect that, for instance, with cycling temperatures, when people are sick. But our bodies basically sleep better when our body temperatures are lower, and we are more active when our body temperatures are higher. And so it has to do with our level of alertness and our ability to be more active. And when those are out of sync, we don't feel well, and we don't function well.
Well, and that makes me think of, I think the most surprising part of that, one of your first slides, the rhythm, was that exercising at 5 p.m. is better than morning. And I feel like I've read a million things that say exercise in the morning. And I know some folks, they want to get it out of the way, so that they get their physical activity in for the day. Do you have any thought, what if someone exercises in the morning, does that affect anything?
So we can exercise anytime we want,
Right.
we may be a little bit like if somebody's like obsessional and measuring like cardiovascular fitness, they may get like a few more percentages if they are measuring it, and they're exercising later in the day. But as far as exercise goes, I think we should do it whenever it works for us, because exercise is important. If our bodies are tired, we're going to sleep better. And it's also, exercise is good for our physiology, for our cardiovascular health, for management of weight, all sorts of reasons why, we should all be exercising to the extent that we can. And so I think, given how hard it is for any of us to maintain a regular exercise regimen, heck, we should do it whenever it works for you personally. The one thing I would say is if you have trouble sleeping, probably you shouldn't be exercising right before bedtime, because it's a very alerting activity, and it probably will make it harder for you to fall asleep. But other than that, either you're an obsessional cardiovascular fitness person, then maybe you want to do it like later in the day. But really, for most of us, I think whenever it works is fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for the mental health piece. Let's see. I think, are there daytime activities that affect sleep? You mentioned something about don't listen to scary podcasts if you can't get to sleep. How does that, if you watch scary things at night? I mean, Midnight Mass just came out on Netflix, if anybody is watching that. What happens when you watch scary things at night?
So when we're scared, our body goes into fight or flight mode, right? So we release a whole bunch of neuroendocrine factors that get ourselves ready for, for running, for being super alert, for being super awake, so that we can fight off the incoming threat. Well, that's probably the last thing you want if you're trying to settle down and get ready for bed. You don't want like physiologic alertness and readiness to fight off enemies. And so you don't want to scare the bejesus out of yourself while you're trying to get ready for bed, or if you wake up in the middle of the night. That's counterproductive. So you don't want to make your physiology at odds with sleep. You want to do something that's soothing, quieting, so developing a bedtime ritual that actually down regulates your body and your brain will help you go to sleep, rather than things that will up regulate your body.
Yeah. But it's so fun to watch scary stuff at night. I mean, it's supposed to be when you watch that, right? This is a question, not just for women, because I want to talk about like menopause, perimenopause, but this makes me ask the question, does your body clock change over time? So as you age, does anything shift?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we all have body clocks, no matter how old or how young we are. So body clocks are important across the lifespan, but the body clock does change developmentally. And so some of the issues that are relevant early in life and those that are relevant later in life are different. So for instance, kids are phase advanced. So young kids are up early and tired early in the evening. But that changes in adolescence. Actually, the body clock shifts. And so, any of us who were ever teenagers or who have teenagers know that teenagers tend to actually be phase delayed. So staying up late and getting up late. And this is a big problem for school districts, because, and there's been a lot of this in the news lately, because oftentimes the older kids have to go to school earlier because they figure, well, it's safer for them to, be on the bus when it's dark out. But in fact, their body clocks are telling them it's the middle of the night. So they're half asleep. And so it's actually bad for their academic performances. And so a lot of school districts have actually tried to align school start times with the body clocks of adolescents. Now that shifts again as adolescents move into adulthood, and the so-called normative circadian rhythms, sort of come online in people's early to mid 20s. Again, every individual is different. There's genetic variation in our body clocks, but by our early to mid 20s, we start to develop our own sort of adult rhythms, and then that starts to break down a bit later in life. So as we enter old age, actually the circadian pacemaker, the body clock, actually doesn't work as well as it did when we were younger. And so many people, older people, have trouble staying asleep and keeping on regular schedules because the body clock isn't as intact or as stable as it was earlier in life. And so again, actually, some of these tips are especially helpful for older adults because you kind of got to give even more cues as you get older to keep the body clock running, because it gets a little forgetful as we get older.
Yeah. My grandfather, if I happen to wake up in the middle of the night, he was up at 4 a.m. doing crossword puzzles in the kitchen. And I'm sure that is because he just couldn't sleep any longer than that.
We require less sleep as we get older, but our body clocks don't work as well.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah. We are getting close to time. Let me see which I have two questions. I consistently wake up at 2:30. It never fails. So I wind up staying up all night, day, then going to sleep right around dark. Part of what wakes me up is I need to pee, but other is back pain. It just seems like I only need 5 to 6 hours of sleep, but I'm concerned about the shift in my sleep, which leads to my second concern, black curtains. Should I use them? So that was, if we could sum up that question, I guess some of it you answered a little bit earlier, Holly, about getting out of bed, not turning on the light. But can you talk about black curtains?
Well, I think that this question raises a couple things that I think are important. So first of all, the optimal sleep time for individuals varies. Sort of normally, most of us require between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. So 5 hours would be a bit short. So that would be unusual for somebody to only require 5 hours of sleep at night. So if I heard somebody tell me that, I'd be like, are you sure you're not tired? Because that sounds like a little low to me, honestly. But dark curtains can be really helpful to, especially, in the summer months when it gets light early. If you can keep your room dark, it'll help you stay asleep longer. So dark curtains can be really helpful. Again, it sort of depends on your living situation, like where but keeping your room dark is really helpful. Darkness is good at night and lightness is good during the day. And the other thing that this question raises is pain. So pain is a huge issue for sleep. We don't sleep well when we're in pain, and there's not a lot we can do to override that. Generally, the thing we need to do is try to figure out the cause of the pain and address that, whether it's, doing some physical therapy or, sort of addressing, so the mechanics of whatever's causing the pain. It's really important to make sure that pain is adequately managed so that you can get good enough sleep. And so if that's a real consistent problem, I urge people to bring it up with their doctors, not only because pain is absolutely no fun at all, but it's also really bad for our mental health, for our physical health, for our sleep.
Yeah, that's thank you. I think we have, we'll just do one more question. And I think, speaking around, again, going back to that sensitivity when you live with a mood disorder, to your body clock, are there ways of, what are the symptoms that can make someone aware that, oh, I think I need to be looking at my sleep? Are there specific things, specific symptoms that come out with lack of sleep?
So I think, lack of sleep can cause a whole host of problems, and so can mismatched clocks, and there's a lot of overlap between them. But when people don't sleep well, and when clocks are mismatched, people, you can experience difficulty concentrating. You can experience stomach upset, kind of a general malaise. People experience irritability and actual mood changes. Trouble concentrating also, actually impairs fine motor and actually gross motor coordination. So it's harder to do physical tasks, and to do physical tasks well, it impairs decision making. So there's really a whole host of negative effects that follow from poor sleep and mismatched clocks. Again, there's overlap there. So, I think so sleep, and mood disorders are really important. So they're both a symptom of the mood disorders, They're and they're also things that we can really target to help improve functioning, health, and well-being in mood disorders. So sleep, really should be front and center when thinking about how to improve our well-being when we're living with mood disorders.
Yeah, most important, since it affects how we eat, how we work, that which of course is that domino effect to continuing depression and at sometimes causing mania. We are at the end of our time. I just wanted people to know, if you want to know any more about physical wellness, if you go to our wellness wheel section, you can hear a podcast we did with Holly last year. She also helped us with a Thriving with Bipolar, where she goes into more information on circadian rhythms and body clocks. So thank you so much, Holly. This has been wonderful as usual speaking with you, and I always learn something new and feel bad about my sleep habits, but I'm going to continue.
Absolutely don't. No. So, okay, wait, I have to say something. This shouldn't leave people feeling bad. I think what it should do is open up an array of ideas. And maybe there's something small a change that you want to make, but it should never leave people feeling bad. I think it should hopefully open up a range of possibilities.
Yeah, I am extra hard on myself, so that is another thing to work on. Okay, so everyone, thanks for joining us. Holly, thanks for joining us, and we hope the rest of you have a good summit. Thank you so much.